All right, so normally in our grow guides, when it comes to the first video, we usually start in the lobby and we do the seeding process. But before we do those videos, we always do some trial runs, especially if it's things that haven't grown in a while, like Stevia. Haven't grown that in quite a little while. And so we do the test. And from the test, we've actually learned a few things. And therefore, that's why we are starting the video in the nursery on the 10 by 20 tray right here with Stevia. So let's have a look. You're right here, and you will notice poor germination rate is what we call it. So why did this happen? Well, there's multiple reasons, and there's things we could have done better. So in our previous attempt, the one that we do before we start filming, especially when it's things that it's been a while that I've grown, we've noticed that there was some germination issues inside the tray, and we weren't getting a full-fledged one-to-one ratio inside our rockwool. And therefore, we were kind of trying to figure out what went wrong, and this is most likely what went wrong, and we're going to do a few tweaks as well towards the end of the video to try to up our chances when it comes to increasing our germinations. So when you buy your packet seeds, so obviously if you're buying bulk, it's going to be a bit different, but if you're buying your packet seeds just like so, you're going to see here germination rate, and it's at 73%. Which means that if you have 100 seedlings, only 73 will sprout according to this. And for some cultivars, that's normal. So what we're gonna do to try to prevent that and be as efficient as possible in this stage is that we're gonna transfer 2 seeds per site in the rockwool. So we're gonna increase the number of seeds. So if the seeds are really expensive, like Stevia is not a cheap seed, it's quite expensive. You gotta keep that in mind in your overall operational expense, but we're still gonna do it. 2 seeds per site, and then we're going to do a few other tweaks later on just to make sure that we increase our germination rate. Now, there is another thing that we can do, and there's something called stratification, which means that you prep the seed first in order to like crack basically the shell and try to help it sprout. So there's multiple ways of doing that. One is to let the seed soak for 24 hours in water, even 72 hours. So if you Google that for the seed that you're doing, you'll see like, oh yeah, we like to do stratification first and exactly what the method is. But one is soaking, the other one is putting it in the freezer for a period of time. And then for bigger seeds, there's even a technique where you kind of create like a little crack in the seed before you're putting in to try to loosen it up. And actually that's sometimes recommended for cilantro, coriander seeds, but in our case we didn't need to do that. So without any further waste of time here, we're gonna go into sprouting the Stevia. So because we're in the back of the farm, we've already pre-soaked our rockwool with water, 5.8 pH. If you'd like to, we don't do it all the time because it takes more time and it's on an operational basis. Sometimes it just saves time to just water it normally. You can cause complications later down the line in the grow area, so it all depends on your operation. But for us, the water and the irrigation system inside the farm can handle that kind of stress with the pH going down. So we're ready pre-soaked. We have our seeding tool that we're already in here, that we're working. So basically we've already done part of the work. I'm just gonna sit it down like this, and then we're gonna go ahead and seed 2 seeds per site. And they're really small seeds, so it could be a bit difficult to get through there. And for these, they're so small that they're actually not in the main packet, they're actually inside of a smaller packet right here. All right, so because the seeds are so small, I don't want to use my fingers because it'll take a long time to do so. So I've kind of spread them on the board right now. And this is the like nice and smooth part. And then I'm just going to take my tweezers and then just push them in like backwards even, and just push them in like so, 2 per site. Like that. And that way I can just push them on each of the sites and count like that at the same time. There is automatic seeding machines that uses like air suction. I've never used one in a container farm environment, but even in a bigger operation like a greenhouse, for example, you won't be able to use the automated air seeding system because the seeds are kind of little tiny pines, like almost like little needles, and they don't get sucked up properly. So for stevia, you got to keep in mind that when it comes to seeding it, it's a bit of a challenge and it's a process. You gotta get used to it. But the beautiful part of it is that once you've seeded them, they will cut and repeat, right? Like it's a crop that we keep on for a long period of time. So I'm just gonna focus here on getting it fully seeded, and then we'll be back at the end. So I found a little bit more of a groove. You gotta have some good eyes, but basically I grab the needle-like section like this, and then I just swipe them on our tool on the right, and then they just drop right into place. And it seems like it's the most efficient way to seed them compared to what I used to do before, which was to just do it by hand basically. So some efficiency there for sure, especially with this new tool. It really helps with seeding quickly. And there you go. All right, so we're gonna continue like that until we're done the entire board. All right, so we finished seeding it. So I'm gonna remove the tool like so, put it behind us right there. And then it's important to always mark down what you're growing and when you started. So I got my trusty painter's tape right here. If you're using GAP software, Good Agricultural Practice Management software, then a lot of the times they get generated automatically and you can print it out. But in our case, we're not using any because it's an R&D farm. So we're just doing it manually. And then what I'm gonna do is our lot number. And then I put the initial of who did it. So it's myself. I did the thing, the seeding. And then I'm gonna put the date. Perfect. And then I also sometimes put which seed company it came from. But if you have a lot number, then it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because you could track it with a lot number. But it's just kind of convenient, especially if we're doing R&D with multiple seed vendors, then at least we kind of get to see from our own eyes, what it looks like. So I'm just gonna remove the tape like so and tape it up. So I got it all tracked like that now. All right, so to help our germination rate, what we're also gonna do is we're gonna take another tray and we're gonna put it on top like this. You could go also reverse, you could go like this, but I just like doing it like that. And then basically we're gonna make sure that the seeds are kept in darkness for at least 72 hours. Also a side note, some of you have been asking questions about if you have some mold that grows inside your rock wool or inside your dome or whatever media you're using, what to do when you're in the nursery section. And so the trick for that is obviously clean environment is key. I know I always repeat it all the time, but if you have clean tray and then the rock wool is sealed before or whatever media is sealed before, you tend to have more issues like that when you're using like cocoa peat moss substrate because they're not as clean. What you could do is have a mix of water and hydrogen peroxide and then just do a light spray on top of it, and then you could come back with hydrogen peroxide and water and lightly spray it often to reduce the contaminants. You could also do hydrogen peroxide, you could do rubbing alcohol as well. You could do hydrochloric acid, so there's all kinds of products to help you clean it. Just look online for the recipes, but that's one way of maintaining it. But nothing beats just proper cleanliness from the get-go, clean air, clean environment, gloves, and clean trays. That will make a big difference. So we're gonna keep here like this in darkness, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna transfer it into a heated pad, and we're gonna let it there for 72 hours in darkness. We're just gonna keep monitoring the sprouting rate, and if we see that it's not sprouting, we're gonna leave it in darkness longer. But as soon as it sprouts, we wanna be able to remove it, because if you don't remove it in time, you're gonna start getting leggy or stretchy seedlings, and they're gonna collapse on themselves. So there's a fine game to play on that part. So let's transfer it. All right, so now that we've transferred it onto the heated mat, we're gonna come back and monitor it every 72 hours to see. Some of them had sprouted fairly quickly on our first run at this in the container farm. But however, when you look at your package, it says here that the time for sprouting is 8 to 10 weeks, but that's outdoors in soil, so it's a different kind of environment, so it could take longer. But basically we're gonna plant at least 30 days into the nursery, and hopefully they all sprout at the same time, and then maybe even maybe even 6 weeks. So we'll have to see on that. Another thing to keep in mind is that the nursery does not have an automated irrigation system. And therefore, for most crops, that's okay because they don't stay long enough that you need to re-water the rockwool. However, when we're starting to get into the 1 month to 2 month period for sprouting rate, then the water will evaporate, especially on the heated mat. And so you want to come in your morning SOPs and have a look by just weighing it like that is what it will tell you how heavy it is. And then as they get lighter, you'll know that, oh, okay, they're about to run out of water, and therefore it's time for you to add some water into it. So what do you add as water into it? Well, obviously you're going to pH it to 5.8, but also there is some companies out there with fertilizer companies, they'll have like a mix that's made for germination, also some root enhancers that you can add to the water. Keep in mind that this will for sure affect your bottom line because you're adding expenses and operational costs to your farm, but it could be worth it regardless. As you're weighing it, if you see that it starts getting light, then you add water, and therefore you'll be able to maintain them at the proper nutrition level and also humidification level. We may even opt to remove the cover at one point so that there's no extra humidity that could cause mold and things like that later down the line. We don't have any mold issue, but it could happen in certain operation where you get mold if you keep the cover on for too long. So a little bit more finicky to start for sure as seeds compared to everything else that we grow. But keep in mind that you're keeping this crop for an extended period of time in the farm, and therefore it may be worth it, especially to give some fresh sugar alternative to your local community. All right, so the first step is to acclimatize them to the new light because they're under very low power light inside the nursery. And so we don't want to shake them too much. So I'm going to make sure that there's enough water in it. Now with experience, you know if there's enough water in it just by weighing it. But if you want to make sure, you could always add like a cup of water, maybe with a little bit of nutrients, very, very light. I would say EC of 0.04. Or if you're in the ppm, in the 400 ppm range, just to give them a little something. And then I'm gonna locate my section here, and I'm gonna dim down my light like so. Not too much, but just a little bit, not to shake them too much. So we're gonna put them at 60% for right now. Now we have a measuring tool as well. I could go and measure my lux, my pars, my ppfd, however you wanna measure it, to see how much intensity is hitting the seedling. I just know that 60% is good, but when you get your farm or when you're doing your operation, you should definitely take a measurement. But you're looking at about 150 to 200 ppfd max for the first day. Then every day I'm gonna come in and slowly increase my light intensity until I reach 100%, which in this system will give me about 380 ppfd of light hitting the seedlings, which is a lot of light. But I'm doing that so I want to stop the stretching. Stevia is prone to stretching, and therefore I want to be careful that they don't try to reach for the light too much, and then once it starts stretching, then you got leggy seedlings and then they fall over. It's a nightmare. So there's a fine balance to play here, and so we want to be careful for that. So I'm going to go to 100%. Let's just say we've been here a few days. We'll go over the transplanting period. So in our system, we have baskets like this with collars, neoprene collars. The neoprene collars are served to stop the light from hitting the water and causing algae, which eats up your nutrients, which clog up the system if it really goes out of hand, but the system can take quite a bit. So we want to keep those in place to protect that as we're not using it, especially if there's no water in it, then obviously you don't need to do it. But in this case, there's water in the system. The day before this, we actually had lettuce growing in here. So we've done the harvesting already and we're ready to transplant right away. So the next thing I'm going to do as well is do my plant spacing ratio. So there's multiple ways of doing this, but basically there's 1-to-1 ratio, 2-to-1 ratio, 3-to-1 ratio. What does that mean? A 1-to-1 ratio is basically every single plant site, I got a plant growing there. A 2-to-1 means I'm gonna grow one, I'm gonna skip one, I'm gonna grow one. So every 2 sites, I'm planting something. 3-to-1, we repeat. And obviously we try to do that as a checker plate type pattern, like a checkered pattern, where basically we'll go diagonally as well, so we can make the best use of space. Every single plant is different, and in all honesty, on the stevia side, especially this batch, because it's been behaving a little bit differently, I'm not sure exactly what my plant spacing ratio will be. So I'm going to err on the safe side, and I'm going to do a 1-to-1 plant spacing ratio. If I see in a few weeks that they start taking way too much space, I can always take them and transplant them on the next one over, and I've maximized my efficiency in terms of plant spacing ratio, and I will know for the next time. So all those things that you can do, keep an eye on it and always tweak the system, because remember, if the light is lighting up a surface with no plants, then you're wasting power. You gotta be able to transplant all that photon from the light into the plant, and therefore that gets converted into plant mass, which pays the bills. So we want to be as efficient as possible. If we're not using the light, we close them and we move on. So keep in mind that as well. So without any further delay, let's go with the transplant, and I will show one more way of transplanting it to save you a little bit on the labor side. All right, so we're ready for transplanting. And so like I mentioned before, we're gonna do 1-to-1 plant spacing ratio because we don't know exactly what the need is going to be. So we're gonna plant them like basically side by side. And then there's 2 different ways of doing it as well to save time, using the basket and not. But before I go into that, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do so, because we're gonna be growing these things very, very soon, these little tiny tomatoes year round, and we're gonna show you exactly how to do it inside your farm. We're the only container farm company that does that at the moment. So subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to see when that video comes out. So I'm gonna empty out my tray now, set it on the platter, and start the operation. By the way, it's one of the best things about working in a container farm or any indoor environment is that you can eat the produce right away. There's no pesticide, no chemicals. Just pop them in your mouth like candies, basically. All right, so I'm gonna separate my rockwool cube like so, right here. And then we have these baskets. So what we can do is put the rockwool directly inside the plant site, and this will allow us to save time for cleaning. But however, it is very good for like lettuce and things like that because they don't stay in it very, very long. But you may expose yourself to algae and things like that because it exposed the fertigation water to light. So you could do that depending on your operation and how clean you run your water. The alternative, of course, is for longer periods of time, like stevia, which is one of the best things about stevia is that it's a cut and repeat. So we're gonna cut it a little bit and it's gonna grow more and more and more over time, is that we're gonna use the basket because it's a more longer longer period of time, and therefore a longer solution, a better solution for this kind of growing method. So we're gonna go like that, and then we're just gonna remove each and every single cloning basket. So right now I'm doing it from scratch because we harvested yesterday here, and then we didn't leave the system empty. We did leave the system empty for the whole night. However, if we would have been a little bit more organized, I guess you could say, in our operation, then we would have right away transplanted the stevia right when we were harvesting the lettuce, and therefore making 100% use of the space. So planning is key, and this is a great example on how you can make those subtle differences between 24 hours and 72 hours in your planning to make sure that the farm is running at peak efficiency. So again, 1-to-1 plant spacing ratio. If I would have done 2-to-1, what would have been my spacing? Well, you probably guessed it right. I'm gonna skip one site and I'm gonna plant my stevia right there to give them more space, but I'm not doing so obviously for this time period. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish the entire tray like so, and I will show you how we're gonna adjust the light in compensation for the fact that some of those seedlings are not fully sprouted just yet we are still transplanting it. I actually forgot another method. So if you have a bunch of baskets that are already emptied out and harvested, you could always, in the nursery or in the lobby, have all of your baskets lined up already. Like so. And then when I go to transplant, it's a lot faster because I can just remove the existing baskets with the collar, not remove the collar at all, and just plug them in like that, and you see the difference in speed. And again, when it comes to planning and be able to determine which of these steps are best for your staff, your operation, and how much everything costs as well, these things can make a big difference in your overall operational efficiency. So that's what we're actually going to do. I'm going to fill in these right away, and then we're going to transplant them very, very quickly. Okay, so we've done the transplant, as you can see right here, 1-to-1 plant spacing ratio. Now, normally I know from experience that if I dim down my light to 60%, it's good enough to maintain our seedlings and to slowly accommodate, slowly have them adapt to the new light. However, because we have really small seedlings in there, that in all honesty, we should have kept in the nursery a little longer, but we're trying to expedite the process here. I'm gonna do a reading, and I'm gonna show you guys how we do our reading on our light intensity and make sure that I'm getting exactly 100 U-moles, at least 100 ppfd, sorry, at least for the first few days, just to slowly acclimatize them to their new environment. And then I'm gonna go up a little bit. So, but that's what it looks like, 1-to-1 plant spacing ratio. You've seen also how to do it efficiently in a different manner, so we're complete on that. So let's go to light cycles, and then we're gonna be done when it comes to this video. We will give you a bit of a teaser though as to what's coming next when it comes to harvesting, especially when it comes to Stevia, an unexpected side effect that happens. All right, so in the previous video, when it comes to growing bok choy, we've shown you how to read the light using the integrated light reading sensor that we have in the farm. However, sometimes for greater convenience, you can have a mobile one that can read in lux or in ppfd as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it right there, and I'm looking for 100 ppfd. And so I'm going to dim down the light. There you go. That's pretty much it. That's great. And then basically I'm at the right amount of light here for the seedling. I'm gonna check on them to see how they behave on like by their color, by if they're wilting, whatever the case may be. Just make sure that they are doing well. And then after that, I'm gonna slowly increase the light cycle throughout the process. Okay, another thing too I forgot to mention in the previous video is that we are supposed to take our labeling from our 10x20 nursery tray here, and then we transfer this onto our growing area. So either centered or one side to the other with the arrow pointing, just so that we can keep track of the lot number, the time, and what's growing as well too. We just use regular painter's tape. You could go fancy with some sort of labeling system, but painter's tape just does the job. It is cheap and it's efficient. So, and it also resists moisture, so that's what's cool about that. So we transplanted that. And then for the rockwool that we did not use, some of you have been asking the question as to, is it recyclable compared to plastic or whatever the case may be, reusable? The answer is complicated, but yes, it is reusable. You can technically clean them, put some seeds in it, and start over again. It adds complexity to your growing operation though, in terms of labor, in terms of cost. You can put it into your own garden and kind of compost them, because at the end of the day, they are rock. It is rock. It's basically molten rock put together, and so you could put them back in the environment. Obviously, to break down, it takes longer, so you gotta keep that in mind, or you chuck them in the garbage, which is not the preferable option. But have a look at your local rockwool manufacturing company. Some of them do offer services to recycle rockwool into secondary product, so it's not fully going to waste like we see a lot with styrofoam type growing media that really just goes to the landfill. All right, and another thing too I forgot to mention, so Stevia is a cut and repeat, and therefore it's going to be in here from 4 to 16 weeks even. It could be quite long. They don't tend to bolt as well if you take care of them, so it's a great crop to have to give natural sugars to your local community or as a wholesale type of market. There's not a lot of people growing this, so that's really interesting as well too. So it's going to be in there for quite a bit of a long time on a cut and repeat process. The more you cut, the more they grow. So that's also an enormous benefit when it comes to Stevia. Previously, we've had it into the nursery for about 4 weeks, but I think our new recommendation will be 6 to 8 weeks most likely, just so that they settle properly. But watch our previous video as to see how they perform with those new updates that we've done when it comes to doing a few tweaks to help them sprout faster. And that's it. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel, click the notification button as well to see when we're coming out with new videos. Also, we're doing cool stuff on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, so have a look at that as well too. And you're gonna see some behind the scenes on filming, but also on the manufacturing side. And see you on the next Grow Guide.